we're not going to heal some of these divisions. The number one unhealable division is Scotland. If I was Scottish, I'd be voting right now to leave the United Kingdom and remain in the European Union. I think we overemphasize the generational thing. I think also something that I lament is a view that is common in a place like London, which is that all of this was caused by ignorance, xenophobia, etc. We cannot describe 52% of the population like that. Even the most visceral and voting with your heart leavism was often very well informed. My side lost, we have to accept it, and I think we will unite around what is the proposal? What is the proposal we're able to get from Europe? What's the maximum amount of engagement with the single market we can get?
But isn't that, that is the problem. A month on, and nature abhors a vacuum, that's for sure. But we are actually no clearer as to what that proposal may be. There may be some very bright young civil servants trying to work that out in the Brexit unit. But Daniel Hannan, you cannot tell the people in here what Brexit actually looks like because there is no prospectus.
Well, before the campaign began, we produced a million-page study on what we would like to do. Now, of course, the reality is it was a very close vote, right? So we don't have a mandate to roll over 48%. That's as big a minority as you can have. As you correctly say, the UK is a partnership of nations. 2 of the 4 parts of the UK voted to remain in. We can't disregard that fact. So we may, if you like, the narrowness of the mandate will exert a measure of temperance, of moderation, because we need to try and find a consensus that both sides can at least live with, even if without great enthusiasm.
But one of the big issues, of course, I know, is that you believe passionately that immigration wasn't an issue. Clearly, your new Prime Minister does, because the thing that she said that nobody else had said was that the position of EU nationals in this country may be an issue, and so therefore that is now out on the table. And that is a division that will now exist. Yeah. People are very concerned. But families, friends.
What is it, opinion polls to say you can guess or we can ask, right? The BBC did its own poll about this, and 21% of Leave voters expect a very drastic fall in numbers of EU migrants after Brexit. 11% of all voters. So plainly this was not the top issue. What people wanted is a measure of control so that we're in charge of roughly who comes in and roughly in what numbers. But that doesn't mean zero immigration.
I think for very bright people in here, the word roughly is a nightmare, because actually what does roughly mean? And you either have free movement of people or you don't. And Paul, immigration was very much an issue, in the northeast of England. Labour didn't get that one right. You may cede lots of votes to UKIP in the future because of that. But what are you going to do about the issue of free movement? It's not a bit of it. It's either free movement or not.
That's not true.
I agree with that.
Ask you about that.
What I would do is, and I'm very strongly pushing this, is that we apply to be in the European Economic Area, to remain in the single market, and we say, because in it you can have an emergency break on free movement, that's only a temporary variance. We say we will address with microeconomic policies the things that people are worried about, give us time to do it, and the challenge has to be to everybody in politics, what is wrong with that? Tell us what you think is wrong with that, since you all claim to be pro-migration, not anti-migration, not racist. Tell us what is wrong with seeking EEA membership and then seeking some form of temporary breathing space to get the consent for migration back.
So, Daniel Hannan, in terms of healing divides, then you said, of course, it was a very narrow vote. It was a vote to leave, but it was a very narrow vote. So what do you think about that kind of model, the Norway model? Is that something that is seriously being considered or not?
So, first point, we're not going to copy any other country. I mean, throughout the campaign, people kept on saying, are you going to be like Norway or like Switzerland or like Guernsey or like Canada? The fact that you're putting the question like that shows that none of those 2 countries has an identical model. So it's silly to ask whom would we precisely mimic. Obviously, we're going to have our own deal.
But nobody yet has come up with a model.
Well, in what every country in Europe has in common, all of the non-EU countries, whether it's Macedonia, Isle of Man, all of them, Switzerland, Iceland, they all have access to the EU market without political union. So plainly, we know the parameters within which these talks are going to happen. We want market access, we want some democratic control.
So there is going to be some free movement under this Conservative government, which is going to actually deal with Conservative MPs who are very concerned about this?
We made one absolutely clear promise, which was that we would take back control of immigration policy. That, in my mind, can mean only one thing. It means that no European court will get to determine who can enter the UK or who can reside in the UK. Having taken back control, It will, of course, be for the people and their parliamentarians to decide whether to have bilateral deals with other people, whether to allow people to come and study, to take up particular job offers. That will be something that will be for us to decide through our own democratic institutions.
And I'll talk about the democratic institutions in a moment. But Paul, when I talked about nature abhors a vacuum, you know, our revised growth figures for this year, 1.7, next year 1.3, you know, there may be an economic downturn which actually harms the very people who voted to leave.
It will. Look, if there's an economic downturn, it harms everybody. And what I am worried about is that, you know, racist populism is out of the bottle. You know, whatever Nigel Farage says now, he regrets using that image. We saw him earlier say that. Racist populism is there in pubs, in clubs. You know, if the economy now goes down the tubes, now I never bought the whole Bank of England Treasury kind of thing, but it could do.
Because they've all retracted
absolutely, yeah. But and I said this publicly, but it may happen. And what we have to do now is to work together, not only to reassure those EU migrants, but you know, a big backlash against Muslims happened on the street after this, who had nothing to do with EU membership. We have to all work to prevent this racist populism getting further out of the bottle.
Well, one word on that. Just a very quick word on that. On the question of bargaining with EU nationals that are here already, is that a goer or not?
Personally, I made clear all the way through we shouldn't put that in jeopardy.
Okay.
I think it's terribly unfair, by the way, to the many British Muslims who voted Leave and campaiged Leave to suggest that somehow they were, you know, they're lumped in with all these racists. I mean, they were making a rational, intelligent decision.
So when people here were asked in a show of hands whether or not when Brexit finally, as Stella Creasy said, what will Brexit be? Brexit is there. Do you believe then that you should put the Brexit plan to the people?
Brexit means that we end the jurisdiction of EU
the
courts
Brexit
over
plan as designed, as you say, there isn't one at the moment, and there isn't a model.
The problem isn't that there isn't a plan. Of course there's a plan. The problem is how much of it can we implement if we want to carry the people who are, the Remainers who haven't accepted the result as we saw earlier. If we want to try and bring with us as many as possible of that 48%, then we may have to stop short of a complete severance and retain many more of our economic and military and diplomatic connections to the EU, including some institutional ones, for the sake of keeping the Union together and the sake of appeasing the whole
I have
country.
to say, right out of time for two of the more retiring characters of the whole EU campaign, Evan.